speaking about this more when we go into the pandemic and how we have seen the human rights situation in that. But we have seen the need to protect the most vulnerable in our society, and I think that is how the human rights situation is right now.
Okay, thank you very much indeed. And to you, Hussein Khalid, Director of Haki Africa, again, just remind us, what is Haki Africa all about?
Thank you very much. Let me first of all appreciate you, Joseph Warungu, and of course NTV for having us on this very, very important day. Haki Africa is a human rights organization that is working at the grassroots, and our main objective is to promote and protect human rights, particularly for vulnerable communities, you know, those that are usually ignored by government services and you know, state operations. And we try to ensure that Mwananchi at the grassroots is actually taken into consideration, and that their rights as guaranteed in the Constitution, particularly Chapter 4 of the Bill of Rights, are guaranteed. So for us, this is a very important day. And as my colleagues have reiterated, we need to ensure that moving forward as a country, human rights are prioritized. We feel very aggrieved, particularly with the COVID-19 pandemic that has exposed the sorry state of human rights in the country. And we are hoping that in the next couple of weeks or months to come, that the situation will improve, because as it is presently, we are in a dire situation that calls for urgent attention.
Okay, thank you so much. And finally, Judy Lamet, welcome to the show this morning. Good morning. Now,
Good morning.
You lead a very important section of the National Police Service, which is a section that deals with not just community policing, but also, you know, the gender violence, protection of children. That's an area that has really suffered a lot with the pandemic, I believe.
Okay, thank you very much. First, let me introduce myself. I'm Judy Lamet, the Director, Community Policing, Gender and Child Protection. I work with the Kenya Police Service and under the bigger umbrella of the National Police Service. It's true, during this COVID-19 and with the containment measures, we have had many cases of sexual and gender-based violence, and that's why it's important for us to have a discussion to see how can we do as police officers and at the same time as members of the public and the media, so that we see what information do we need to give to the people out there so that the crime rate can go down.
Okay, thank you. Now, Hussein, let me come to you now. Looking, that's what the comments made by Julie there really takes us into, Judy rather, takes us into a quick review of our human rights situation during the pandemic. We have not had a very good record, especially right at the beginning. What were some of the experiences, some of the violations really that we witnessed? Just remind us again.
Okay. The pandemic has not been very kind to us. As the Police Reforms Working Group, for example, we've recorded, and of course Mr. Kiama and Julie are part of that group, we've recorded during this pandemic over 130 killings that have been linked or associated with the police in this country. And by any means, this is a very, very sad situation. 130 means around 15 killings every month. And even before the pandemic, we felt that, you know, killings associated with the police are on the rise. But looking at this pandemic period alone, we have noted a rising in numbers. And it's not just police killings. Julie has spoken about the SGBV cases. We have seen that you know, this enforcement of these guidelines in some situations have forced particularly women and children to be vulnerable. You know, with the curfew, it means that no one can actually go out. So the perpetrators know that when they commit this violence against women and children, these people will not have anywhere to run to because the curfew is limiting them. We know situations where individuals actually ran away from home, women ran away from home to go seek help, and in the process of doing that they were actually arrested, and some of them were even harassed further. So the situation is not good.
Okay.
At the coast, we've seen also a rise in police raids. Disappearances are also on the rise. We have recorded over the last 3 months around 18 disappearances. And by any means, this is not a good sign. So we are saying as human rights practitioners that yes, the COVID-19 pandemic is a mystery. Many of us are across the world. We didn't know how exactly to deal with it. But as a country, Kenya, we have our priorities set wrong, and particularly with the police, we were hoping to get or to see better results from them, but unfortunately up to now, particularly with the special enforcement units, we have seen even human rights defenders who come up to try and arrest the situation, to try and make things better. They are also targeted. You did a very good story at the beginning of this show, showing how one of our colleagues just disappeared, and unfortunately this is on the rise. We are seeing arrests, we are seeing harassment of human rights defenders, and this is something that is very concerning to us.
Okay, thank you. Now, Bwana Kiama, from where you sit, how has COVID-19 impacted on the human rights situation in the country?
I think the first, it's been a very new experience for this country, this period of the pandemic. One thing that the pandemic has exposed in our society is the societal weaknesses and institutional weaknesses in terms of supporting the most vulnerable within our communities, especially people from poor backgrounds, the unemployed, people who do not earn a living on regular hours. Those have really been affected. It has exposed the weaknesses within the National Police Service, for example, with regard to dealing with an emergency like this. And these weaknesses are not, for example, to be associated with the police service itself. They are also external with regard to funding of the National Police Service. We found that the National Police Service being given a responsibility to detain suspects who were not adhering to the guidelines, and to detain them within the cells with social distancing. I mean, that is impossible, completely impossible to do that. So we found the police service being given responsibilities without adequate support, by government to be able to then apply those rules, within the parameters that were given by the Ministry of Health. But we also found a situation whereby health workers were given responsibilities without enough resourcing. We found the health system very weak. And I think this is a wake-up.
Also putting them at risk in a sense.
Precisely. Not well equipped, not well resourced, including financially. But we also found a very serious policy gap, because the pandemic was, the response mainly was about prevention. But we ended up equipping those who are treating, not those who are preventing, the public health personnel, the public health volunteers across the country. So we found weaknesses even at the level of policy and administrative measures that we need to be able to take. Now, with regard to human rights, I think the saddest thing was that we proceeded to enforce the health measures from a point of punishment. So we ended up not co-opting the public to work with government agencies to prevent the spread of the pandemic. We actually treated the public as enemies instead of treating the public as partners in prevention. And that particular relationship ended up in serious human rights violations. At IMLU, we have ended up documenting since March over 80 cases of human rights violations, especially by the National Police Service, but also at some level by public administrators within the national government, like the chiefs, the assistant chiefs.
Okay.
Over 20 of them are killings, some deaths in custody, including the latest last week in police custody. The others are torture and ill treatment. Others are destruction of property. Law enforcement agencies going into people's homes. We had a case in Busia that was a classic case where, police and county law enforcement agencies that we call Kajo, Askaris, went into a home, terrorized a family, destroyed their property. You know, they lost over 200,000 shillings worth of property. So you wonder, I mean, how do you get into destroying people's property, killing people, torturing people, mistreating them in the name of public health? It's quite a contradiction in terms.
Right.
Yeah.
Okay. Now, Madam Judy Lamet, let me come to you now. And from where you sit, you've had a lot on your desk in terms of responding to some of these abuses, where police have been responsible for some, but inside homes, in terms of some of the domestic violence that we've witnessed. Give us a sense of some of the challenges you've had to deal with in trying to bring peace to homes and to protect children. Okay.
It's true. There has been an increase in sexual and gender-based violence, not necessarily only domestic violence. And we have, you know, the problem with the curfews and lockdowns is that most of these offenses happen in the privacy of the homes of the people. And there was a problem because people could not come out to go and report because they were afraid of curfews and they were afraid of the lockdowns. So it was escalated. There were many cases happening within the family of sexual in nature, including incest. So the problem we have had, or the challenges we have had, is that at times we can receive a call, somebody saying that they're being assaulted or they are being defiled, and when we go to the house, the policeman asks for information and they say, no, we did not call. So also, I don't know if the people are being told not to say, not to report cases, but we have learned to work with other government institutions and CBOs and NGOs who come in handy to help us in penetrating that field. You know, we cannot police people's houses, but when we receive a complaint, we have always taken action. We also have come up with a toll-free line. We didn't have, we only used to use 999, but now we have a line specifically for SGBV. And this line was circulated, and 5 radio stations reported it. And I want to give it to you now, to the Kenyans. The number is 0800 730 999. And as we go on, I'm going to talk about all the things we have done to at least make sure that these issues to do with GBV are being taken care of. From the reports that come to you, have you been able to pick up any trends? For example, are there particular areas of the country or particular incidents which are more... Is the data saying, is the data giving us a story? Yes, there is a story in the data, in that most of the cases are happening in the slum areas. Within the areas where we have slums, I think there is not much monitoring of the children. And we have taken it upon ourselves even to do a community service to the people with the support of the Directorate and partners, and also the Deputy Inspector General Kenya Police Service. We were able to even go to the slums and talk to them, talk to the community. At the same time, providing for food and also sanitizers in conjunction also with the street families. So with the danger areas are the slum areas. Oh, okay. Now to you, Julie Madeka, from an ICJ perspective, in terms of how the not just the curfew, but how the measures, the containment measures and everything else that was put into place was enforced, what were your concerns? And we used the word enforced because it wasn't really supervision, it was enforcement. As a commission of jurists and also in coalition with the Police Reform Working Group, we were very concerned with the force that was used to contain persons during the pandemic period. I think when we started, the curfew was at 7 p.m. And during that period, we noticed that as early as 6 p.m., there were persons who were being forcefully urged to go back home by police officers in a manner that was not in tandem with the Police Standing Orders Act. And we found that, and we even issued statements to the effect that this was wrong. There was unreasonable force used, and
unfortunately, even in terms of, and I agree with what Mr. Kiama said, even in terms of dialogue, there wasn't a lot of room for dialogue between the public and the police officers. Once we saw the relaxation of the curfew guidelines to around 9 p.m., we saw that Kenyans were more cooperative with the police officers to ensure that people were home. But as a commission of jurists, at the beginning of the curfew, we were very concerned about the police excesses that we saw during that period, and we issued statements. We even had discussions with the Inspector General of Police around how to handle this situation better, because the common enemy was COVID, not the people versus the police. We also, at that same time, were very concerned about various issues that were happening in and around that period. We had the issue of forced evictions happening, where persons ended up sleeping outside during that period. We also noted the fact that a mask, a simple mask, was being used as a tool for excesses and corruption. And this is something that ideally one would consider as a petty offense. So we were looking at the fact that petty offenses were also being used to undermine persons in the poor and the vulnerable communities. And with that, we actually spoke to various entities, including the criminal justice actors, to look at how they are handling petty offenders during this period, because we noted that the National Council on Administration of Justice issued directives around the management of petty offenders, including the fact that they shouldn't be incarcerated in the police stations, decongestion programs in the prisons, as well as speedy and expeditious trials in the justice system. But our concern was the fact that a person who was outside past curfew hours, a person who was outside during the lockdown period, ought to be first queried and asked, why are you in this position? Why are you outside? And instead of forcing them, or rather using force to tell them to go home and making them go home, we should ask those questions. So we saw the beginning of the curfew period as a very tumultuous period in Kenya, but I think certain practices have since been left to those periods, and we are now working together. I think that's where I want to go to next, and I'll come back to you, Madam Judy Lamet. From a police point of view, there were, it was a very harsh enforcement, but now, so many months later, in the month of December, have things improved in terms of how the police manage these health protocols that are in place?
I tend to believe there is an improvement. This is because we have trained all OCSs in the country on how to handle members of the public, and also for them to train the officers under them, especially through community policing, on how to handle these people who are flaunting curfew rules. And if there is any complaint from members of the public, we have institutions that have been mandated, especially on issues to do with extrajudicial killings. We have Independent Policing Oversight Authority. We also have Internal Affairs Unit. We also have internal mechanisms. And also, like we have other NGOs that do deal with it. So we are saying it's true, maybe there could have been police excesses. We cannot say that all of us are doing the right thing, but even for those who do the wrong things, we are able to deal with them departmentally, and also all those other institutions that are put in place for them to check the police excesses.
It's good to hear that there's been police training, especially for OCSs. So if I'm just like an ordinary citizen walking about the streets without wearing my mask for whatever reason, how much force should the police use on me?
Police are supposed to use force proportionately. You know, the human rights, it must be proportional to the offense. But not wearing a mask is not necessarily a capital offense. But maybe in future it's a capital offense if you're having COVID and you go infecting people without a mask. But we cannot assume that you are infected. But we have been told, put on your mask. Let us observe Ministry of Health COVID-19 protocols. There should not be force. What should happen is that this person should be treated with dignity. As my colleague has said, they can, if they have a reason why they are not wearing a, well, I don't think there is a reason why you're not wearing a mask, but if you have a reason why you are out, maybe you're from a hospital, maybe there is an emergency, the police should be able to listen to you.
Okay.
Yeah.
Okay, thank you. Now, Hussein, let me come to you in terms of where we're at. A lot has happened. Let's talk about quest for justice for people who have been victims or lost, you know, their loved ones who are disappeared. Where are we at as far as you know?
Yeah, okay. So I agree that in the beginning, particularly of the pandemic, the harassment was quite high. But as time went by, we saw improved services, particularly from the police and other law enforcement agencies. But the recent announcement of the Special Enforcement Unit has again, unfortunately, raised the levels of violations in the country. I think NTV did a very good expose the other day on the young man who was jogging in Mombasa, and the police came, and just because the mask was lowered, they had to come in. They even used the machine gun and a pistol just to try and arrest the individual. I think this is the extent to which the police are going beyond the limits, and we're saying that you know, you use reasonable force, yes, definitely, and citizens also have to take that responsibility, you know, to make sure they abide by the guidelines. But you know, the police in enforcing those guidelines have to be reasonable. We have seen these enforcement units now becoming a cash cow. There's massive extortion. People are saying either I take you to the police station, you pay 20,000, or you part with 5,000 shillings on the spot. And I believe these are sentiments that are echoed across the country. And in terms of where we are presently, I think as a people, the resilience we have as a country is just, you know, something to admire. I believe many people in the country still feel that the government has its priorities misplaced. Just to give the example of the brilliant doctor who passed away the other day, Dr. Moguso. You know, this is an individual who was actually working, putting his life on the line to protect citizens. Yet we have money, resources that are supposed to be used for these purposes that have been embezzled. In one way or another, they've just disappeared from you know, the public coffers. So then the question we're asking is, why is the government having its priorities set in the wrong places? What are we doing, for example, to follow up, to ensure those that have stolen this money have been brought to account, and that money brought back for the services for the Mwananchi?
Okay.
And we feel that still a lot needs to be done. We can't compare ourselves with other countries such as Uganda, such as Tanzania. As a country, we should always strive to be better and compare ourselves with other countries that have done way much better.
Okay.
And I believe that there's still more to be done. And I know that the police are trying, and we are trying also as human rights organizations to meet them halfway. But they need to do more for us to be able to meet them halfway.
Okay, Hussein, thank you. Now to you, Bwana Kiema. Looking ahead, what lessons have we learned, good and bad, in terms of building our capacity and attitude towards handling such a health crisis or a national pandemic like this one, you know, but at the same time ensuring that citizens are treated fairly?
Yeah, I think we've learned quite a number of lessons. But just before I go to the lessons, if you allow me,
sure.
There are two other issues that have manifested during this pandemic. Number one is that there has arisen an appetite for government to use the pandemic to limit the freedom of assembly and association. And there are many cases where there are those who are allowed to meet and there are those who cannot meet.
Especially politicians.
Exactly, especially the political, the political parties. And that is a worrying trend, especially as we head to next year and to the 2022 general elections. And even within our civic space, as civil society, we are concerned that the same measures may be used. And so we have to watch that space. That whole issue of the discriminatory approach to enforcing the measures is worrying for us. But in terms of the lessons we've learned, I think one lesson we've learned is that using force to get public cooperation is counterproductive. And I think we saw it. All those running battles that we saw in the first months of enforcement, and even now, those running battles are still there, out there. It's only that they are not manifesting necessarily in violence like earlier. They are now manifesting, as Hussein said, in extortion and corruption. So enforcement has become an avenue for rent seeking by the law enforcement officers. That is more subtle and therefore not as public as the violence that we saw. So we are not saying that things are better than in March, April, May. It's only that the abuse has changed into rent seeking, which is more quiet and more away from the public. The other lesson I think we've learned is the need for us to trust our professionals to lead us in situations where we need expertise, and not to always rely on our politicians, because they invest in double speak. They tell you have to comply with these measures, and they don't comply themselves. But you see the health professionals sticking to it, to the rules, with very minimal resources. I think we need to trust in our public health professionals, the people who do preventive health, the people who have always told us, even before COVID-19 appeared, please wash your hands before you eat, please wash your hands after you visit a toilet. They've always told us these things, but we now listened. We only listen to the doctors because when we go to them when we are very sick and desperate. I think it's a high time that we invested more in preventive health, even beyond this pandemic. The other area for me is the need for the National Police Service and government to realize that the amount of force that you use to get public cooperation has a correlation with the legitimacy of the institution. The more force the police use, I think the less legitimate they are in the eyes of the public. The less force the police use to get compliance or cooperation, I think the higher the more legitimate the police service is in the eyes of the people. So we need to invest in public trust, and that requires that the police display competence, but that they also display integrity, in the eyes of the public, to seek this cooperation. Cooperation from the public will never come through force. It won't. The colonial government tried for over 100 years. They didn't get it. So I think those are some of the lessons I would say that I think we've learned, even before we go to how to recover.
Thank you. Madam Judy Lamet, I wonder, has there been any soul searching within the National Police Service, and looking back at what have the police learned themselves from how they have managed the situation and the response that they have received from the citizenry?
I want to agree with Mr. Kiama that we cannot get friendly or a partnership with the public if we are coming from a point of force. It is very important that as police officers we practice people-centered policing. We are here for the people. Ours is a service to the people. And this is the training that is being done and the sensitizations that are being done to make sure that police understand that it is the people who have employed us. We need to change and also embrace community policing, because it is a partnership between the community and the police.
How would you say the community policing is going?
We have those that are very vibrant, but the ones that have not been started, they have already started the process of having community policing committees. And as you are aware that community policing is anchored in the Constitution and also in several acts of the country, the laws in the country. So community policing should be key, where the public have a say. And when we work together, we develop a partnership and we get information that will help in the prevention. Because how a police is efficient is by the absence of crime. I also wish to say that in as much as maybe we may have done maybe the wrong things, I also want to say police are also in the front line. People have been talking so much about doctors, but they have forgotten that also police are in the front line. And police, very many police officers have died, hundreds by COVID-19. We also need to have a debate on also how the police can continue executing their duties and also have a safe environment.
Okay. Now, thank you. Julie, let me come to you. Maybe we can now start looking ahead towards solutions? We've seen the pandemic. There may be more to come. This thing is not going away anytime soon. So what do we take forward in terms of creating better responses to a situation like this, one of the pandemic? What are your thoughts now looking ahead, maybe even to a post-COVID world?
All right. I think as a society, what this pandemic has taught us is that we need to create policies, and proper policies at that. So we need to come back to the table and draft policies with a collaborative approach so that everyone has their ideas and brings them to the table so that we can prepare for the future. We also need to invest in capacity building and training of all persons who are involved in emergency response so that they are prepared to better deal with this situation in the future. We look at the fact that we need to strengthen the institutions that are at the front lines of dealing with certain pandemics, certain emergent issues, and certain emergencies. We are looking at a 2022 election. When do we start preparing for that? Can we learn from COVID and also start preparing adequately? There are other things that we have also learned because of this pandemic. There are need to create safe houses, places where people can get shelter. And these are things that had been recommended over a period of time because of election periods and because of other pandemics, other instances of emergent situations that have occurred. But now we see the real reason and the need and the emergent need at that to create these things. So what this pandemic has taught us is that there is need for a lot of institutional strengthening, a lot of policy review, a lot of legislation to be created, particularly on even criminalizing enforced disappearances and looking at various gaps that we have seen during this period. There are also issues around, for example, at the beginning of the COVID period, we had matters around forced quarantine. How do we best deal with this moving forward so that it is done in a humane and dignified manner so that persons who have traveled, persons who have been exposed are also treated well because they are Kenyans, they are humans, and also looking at how do we destigmatize pandemics, because I think one of the biggest issues that happened is that because of the stigma of COVID-19, because of what that presented at the time, people are not able to go to police stations, people are not able to go to hospitals, people are not able to seek for help. So how can we better put the messaging out there going forward that it is okay, it is all right to seek help? So I think we have learnt a lot.
Okay.
We have really learnt a lot, and our policies moving forward should reflect that.
Okay, thank you. Now, Hussein, trust has been lost to a large extent between wananchi and the police. We're trying to get to a situation where the principles of community policing, which means it's a collaborative effort. How do you rebuild trust, and how do you bridge the divide between the citizens and the police?
Thank you, and that's a very, very important issue, Joseph, and I believe that as a country, that is exactly where we need to start. Building trust. The trust deficit between the police and communities is very high. Unfortunately, the pandemic has not been very kind to us in that it has exacerbated the situation. And I'm very encouraged as a human rights organization that is working at the grassroots, listening to Madam Judy, who is agreeing that we need to do more of cooperation than forcing people to abide by the rules and guidelines. I think this is exactly where we need to start. We need to start dialoguing. We need to start talking with each other as opposed to talking to each other. Police must adopt practices that bring communities closer to them, sharing of information, and being able to, understand each other's situation. As the police service, we need to start having meetings within communities, particularly the vulnerable communities, the slum areas. It shouldn't be something where police are seen only when there is an emergency or when there's a security situation. I think we have come very far in terms of police reforms, and what we need to do now more is have police and communities dialoguing and addressing issues that affect the people. If we are able to do that, if we'll be able, to open up the channels of communication, I believe that will be the beginning of getting communities and the police to trust each other more.
Okay.
I also feel that the police service need to do more in terms of addressing human rights violations. I'll give an example of Bamba police station, and Madam is here. There is no gender officer. And I know that the numbers that we have perhaps of ladies or women in the police service are not high enough, but we need to find better ways of ensuring that these police stations are manned or womaned, with the relevant officers. We also need to see more trainings in terms of community engagement and public relations. This is something every police officer needs to begin thinking. And I believe if at the top, we are able to send the right message to the junior officers, then we should be able to reduce the trust deficit that we have in the country between the police and communities.
Hussein, thank you. And maybe finally, Bwana Kiama, how do we address some of the failures that have been exposed by COVID and build back better, which is the theme of what this Human Rights Day is all about?
I think that what I would say is that what we need to do now is build back better together, not separately, together. If you look at what COVID-19 has told us, it has told us that we have to have institutions working together. If you look at the criminal justice system, it's only a bit later in the pandemic that they realized, hey, the police are doing their own thing, the judiciary are doing their own thing. And therefore there was a disconnect until the government finally set up this center in Kasarani International Stadium, where then there was a special court to deal with the COVID-19 cases. Criminal cases, and that really helped to a large extent to avoid suspects arrested and placed in cells. Because where else were the police going to place those suspects? So I think that interagency approach will be very critical in any other emergency in the future. But also, I think investing more in treating the public as agents of change as well, and treating the public as key partners and as the principals in government. Because there's this approach of always treating the public as suspect, as disobedient, I think doesn't help at all. So I think trust is at the center of the rebuilding effort. Without that, without dealing with the trust deficit, as Hussein has said, we won't go very far. We will still repeat the same things next time, and especially as we approach we approach the elections. The other thing I would like to say is that with regard to government behavior and conduct and approach to these things, I think I would call upon Kenyans, my fellow Kenyans, to be very vigilant. Very vigilant. Eternal vigilance, as they say, is the price of democracy. We are building a democracy that is anchored on the rule of law. Any time that we allow our government to approach us from a point of departure from the rule of law, we are all in danger. And we saw that last week, where junior officers in Ruai arrested and beat up a senior officer because he was outside curfew hours. He even tried to explain himself. And they ran after him all the way to his gate and arrested him and messed him up. I'm happy that the Internal Affairs unit of the police were able to respond very fast. So we are all in danger if you allowed us to depart from the rule. That's what I'm saying. None of us is safe if we do not safeguard the rule of law.
Okay. Wanakemba, thank you. And just before we go, let's check if we've got some comments from you. We've been asking you what you make of our human rights standards on our hashtag New Normal, and some thoughts. So how well are we doing in safeguarding our human rights in Kenya? Some comments from, this is Fikirini Jacobs. I think we're yet to get to the level where we can include the word well in assessing our efforts towards human rights and dignity. Okay, thank you, Jacobs, for that. And we also have another one from Ole Lawson, by being right. Okay, I wish you'd expanded on that. But thank you. Thank you so much to my panel for this first hour of the program. Mr. Peter Kiama, who is the Executive Director, Independent Medical Legal Unit. We have also been speaking with Julie Madeka, Senior Program Officer at the International Commission of Jurists Kenya chapter, and also Madam Judy Lamet, who is Assistant Inspector General of Police and also Director of Community Policing, Gender and Child Protection. Also with us has been Hussein Khalid, who's the Director of Haki Africa, which is a human rights organization. That's all we have time for this hour, but we'll be back straight after the break to look at other dimensions of this Human Rights Day. Stay tuned and come back to the show.
Premium candles. It is made of pure, fully refined paraffin wax. It doesn't have smoke. It has long burning hours. It is non-drip. It doesn't smell.
Always smile and walk with Sumo Candle from Rock Industries Limited. For inquiries, visit our offices at Ndume Road off Lungalunga Road behind Carton Manufacturers near Sinai Stage. You can also talk to us through 0722 575 619.
Did you know at Warungu Factory you can open an account and lipa pole pole at your convenience? Did you know at Warungu Factory you can get customized sizes according to your roof plan to avoid wastage? Did you know Warungu Factory offers free delivery countrywide within 72 hours?
To order, call us now on 0111 050 700. Warungu Factory, Mali safi kwa bei poa.
This Christmas, jaza kwa sababu there's a whooping 1 million bob to be won. All you have to do ni kupiga shopping worth 1,500 and above. Na uko ndani ya draw. Krisi, ibambe na Quickmart. Quickmart, fresh and easy.
This week on the trend.
We are the Galem Sugar. Same time on the Galem Banana. We are the Galem Sugar. Same time on the Galem Banana.
Abs.
Only on the trend.
What a relief! Thank you, Gold Crown. If regular milk makes you feel uncomfortable, try Gold Crown lactose-free milk. Milk that loves you.
Finder from the BBC.
A victim of revenge porn in Zimbabwe opens up about fighting shame and betrayal.
He sends me a message and he says, "Oh, if you don't come back, you know I have those pictures."
Campaigns marred by misinformation as the UK gears up for a fierce election contest.
And online all the time, but how did the internet start 50 years ago?
Every spoonful of Nutri comes loaded with the necessary vitamins, protein and minerals for you and your family to become healthier and stronger. Pick up a pack today from your nearest store. Nutri, every spoonful counts.
Wewe lori imekata break. Bra, when you gotta go with Neptune.
Welcome back to Your World this Thursday morning, and on this Human Rights Day, we are looking at the human rights situation in Kenya with a panel of experts. But just before we go into part 2 of this conversation, in the interests of natural justice, I think it's only fair that I allow 1 minute to my panelists to give us their closing thought, and then we can switch gear. I'll start with you, Judy Lamet from ICJ Kenya. Your closing thought?
All right. Thank you very much for the opportunity to be on the show and to share on human rights in 2020 on this Human Rights Day. I want to base my parting shots on the decision of the Africa Court of People and Human Rights judgment that was delivered on 4th of December that stated that the continued criminalization of the poor and vulnerable in Africa is completely against the spirit of the African Charter that all countries have signed on to. So bringing that to Kenya, I want to say that once we are looking at various measures, we also need to look at the fact that certain practices are actually discriminatory against the poor and the vulnerable in society. And we need to ensure that those are the people who are protected, those are the people who we look at, and those are the guidelines and mechanisms that we put in place to ensure that these people are not indiscriminately affected by policies we put in place. So we should not forget the poor and the vulnerable moving forward. Okay. Poverty is not a crime. It has never been a crime, and it ought not to be a crime, particularly in a pandemic.
Thank you. Thank you so much, Julie. And to you, Madam Judy Lamet, your closing thought?
Okay, thank you very much. I just wish to say that we will endeavor as police officers to have like the gender desks where we don't have them, and the child protection units for the purpose of children who are in conflict with the law and for those who need care and protection. I also wish to state that we are having a model coming up. The launch has been done. It's called Polycare, where we have a one-stop center. And this place is where all victims, or all, these days I think they are called survivors of sexual and gender-based violence, will report. We'll have a doctor there. The forensic services will be in the same place. The judiciary, the courts will be there, and the prosecutor. The pilot project is going to be in the old Nairobi area, and the policy document is already out, the TORs and the strategic plan are out. It will be replicated all over the country. Where you have any issues related to SGBV, you need to have your dignity back. You don't have to move from one place to another, but just go to one place and everything is done for you. So okay. We are happy with it, and we are hoping to receive funding and support from any other person who is interested, so that we can have this model up and running. We have had challenges in terms of where to take especially victims of incest, because once they have reported, where do we take them? Okay. We have to rely on private rescue centers. I would request, if it is possible, for the government to come up with a rescue center, so that it is easy for us to take those survivors of SGBV. And finally, I wish to say that as police officers, it is important for us to respect human rights and practice, as we also execute our duties, the principle of legality, necessity, proportionality, non-discrimination, and have the human face. Thank you.
Thank you. And earlier you also told us the use of minimum force will also be really minimum, as the law intends it to be.
Yes, that's we are trained to do that, but we will continue doing it. You know, I like the part that they said we need to be more friendly to the public.
Okay.
Because the public are our parents, our sisters, our brothers, our uncle. We came from the public. We are the public. When we work, we need to think, if it was my mom who was in this situation, would she be treated the same way?
Thank you. Thank you very much indeed, Madam Judy Lamet, and the rest of our panel, Peter Kiama, Julie Madeka, and also Hussein Khalid for joining us this morning. We'll switch gear now to part 2 of this conversation on human rights. And I'd like to invite Mr. Nyangori Oenjo, CEO, Center for Minority Rights Development. Good morning and welcome to your world.
Good morning, Warungu. I'm happy to be here today, and of course sad that we're talking about violations of human rights on an International Human Rights Day.
Okay, now I think I want to start from the beginning. When we talk about Center for Minority Rights Development, what's your organization all about?
The Center for Minority Rights Development, very briefly, was founded in the year 2001. And our main focus is strengthening the capacity of minorities and indigenous peoples in Kenya to be able to advocate for their rights. So our work revolves around securing the rights of minorities and indigenous peoples in this country.
Oh, okay. Now, the thing that's on a lot of people's minds in Kenya at the moment is Huduma Number. Round 1 of Huduma Number, not everybody managed to access their cards, and you know there will be another round of registration. But you have some concerns around Huduma Number and the whole process of registration.
Yeah, definitely yes, and I think I'll just start by saying directly that the Huduma Number process is currently designed is a process that excludes a very huge population of this country and puts people at risk of being disenfranchised, puts people at risk of being, completely declared stateless. We are talking about a situation that obtains from the current ID system, which is the basis for issuing Huduma Number, where many Kenyans, up to 5 million by our estimates, do not have IDs, not for any reason of their own making, but because of the frameworks, because of the laws, because of the policies that the government has put in place that directly violates their right to citizenship. And in that process, we also have situations of many more children, because of these challenges, who do not have birth certificates. So when you're making these two very important documents, the basis and foundation for Huduma Number, and you've not resolved this issue of citizenship to so many people who are facing, human indignity, because citizenship is actually the basis for human dignity. It's the basis for all other human rights. You cannot enjoy your all other human rights when, in the first place, you're not a citizen. So we are talking of a very huge population here that faces the risk of exclusion, faces the risk of totally being wiped out of the history of this country. And that is a problem that we have with Huduma Number.
Just on that point, a little bit more, some people may struggle to see the direct connection between Huduma Number and human rights. We don't quite associate the two normally. Hello, can you hear me, Mr. Nyangori?
Yeah.
I think your connection.
Okay.
Give us a moment to reconnect to you. I think we're losing you on the connection, Bwana Nyangori. We'll just be able to. Okay. Can you hear me now? Well?
Yeah, I can hear you.
Oh, fantastic.
I can hear you now.
Yeah. So my question was, that connection between Huduma Number and human rights, we don't normally see these two things as connected.
Yeah, the first, for us to connect that, we have to go back to the conversation of what is human rights. And human rights defines our our dignity as a people. Human rights are what makes us enjoy all the other rights in terms of the right to education, the right to health, the right to employment. And we can only get these rights if we are citizens in the first place. Now, when you're denied citizenship, it means that your dignity has been devalued. It means that your dignity has been compromised. Now, when you look at citizenship and you look at human rights, then Huduma Number becomes a central plank in this conversation, because Huduma Number then becomes the basis of identification of people in Kenya. And if you're not part of that identity conversation, then it means that you are not going to definitely attain your human rights. You're going to suffer. You're going to lack opportunities for employment. You're going to lack opportunities for taking your children to school. You're going to lack opportunities for accessing medical facilities. And, you know, when you have a population of about 100 million that are going to suffer all these indignities, then it's a cause to worry for this government. We cannot just sit in our backyards and say we are pushing forward this process without complete regard to the rights of people who are going to serve. Because you're telling us that for you to access government services, and which are public services that are paid for by taxpayers, you must have a Huduma Number or a Huduma card. So what about these people, these communities, these members of communities who, by virtue of just having been disenfranchised by reasons that are not their own creation, what is going to happen to them? You know, what is going to happen to this person, to this young boy who is 18 years and is required to produce a birth certificate of his grandfather for him to get an ID card? What is going to happen to this lady who has an ID, but because of these regulations that have recently been put in place, cannot access birth certificates for her children? What is going to happen to her when she wants them to go to school, when she wants them to go to for health
and just on that, Bonanyangori, these millions of people that you mentioned who are effectively stateless, how do we end up with such large numbers of people who are stateless in Kenya?
I think that might want to take us to a little bit of history of where we started this whole problem of citizenship rights. And it's a colonial problem that was taken over by this current government and by the subsequent governments, and they've never been able to address the issue effectively. We had a situation where during the colonial period, the Nubian community, which is in Kenya today, was forcibly conscripted from Sudan and became part of the British, excursions and army. After the World War II, when the British were, Kenya was a British colony, the Nubian community who were working with the British at that particular time were demobilized. They were removed from the armed forces and given settlements in various parts of Kenya, including Kibra. If you go to Kibra, Kibra is actually a Nubian word, which means forest. That place was hugely forested, more than 5,000 acres. So they were given this land, and the only problem is that when they're given this land, they were not given British citizenship at that particular time. Remember, the British policy at that particular time was they would grant citizenship to people who were close to them. The Indians who came to build the railway were given citizenship. The Nubians remained the British subjects. At one point, actually during that process, they wanted to be repatriated back to Sudan, but the British government refused at that particular point. At independence, they also made that request to be repatriated back to Sudan or be given British citizenship. They were not, neither was acceded to. And we then have a population that transited into the Kenyan nationality system, but without nationality recognition. So they were not officially recognized as Kenyan citizens, and that problem has persisted to date. So what has happened?
So legally, who are they? What's their legal position in terms of where they belong?
The legal position is that they are currently stateless, and they are given, members of the community are actually given identification documents at the pleasure of government. This is supposed to not to be the rule. You know, it's about when government wants something from them, like they want votes in Kibra, they'll go and give a few people ID cards. But the community members have really gone through a lot of humiliation, a lot of violation in terms of when they want to access identity documents. They are forced to produce extra documents. We've had people who are being told to produce the birth certificates of their great-grandfathers. You know, that is an impossibility. But this is something that is not enshrined in law. These are just roadblocks that have been put by the bureaucratic system in government to really disenfranchise this population and a number of other populations. After independence, we started having a lot of border conflicts, and therefore we've had other communities come into this mix. We've had people like the Borana, we have people like the Maasai, you know, communities along the border. We've had Arabs, we have some Indians, some Somalis who cannot access identity documents for very flimsy reasons, yet they're Kenyans.
So now, and because of those challenges in terms of these people can't access ID cards, is that why you have issues with using the ID card as the basis for Huduma Number registration?
Definitely. I mean, already we have a system that the government itself is saying is flawed, that they want to correct it. You cannot correct a system that is flawed, you know, by using it to create another system. I mean, it's not logical. It doesn't make sense that you're already saying that, you know, we have a flawed system that probably some people got ID cards as Kenyan citizens and they're not Kenyan citizens, and you're using the very same system to then come up with a system you are calling a source of truth. How will it be a source of truth when the basis, when the foundation is a flawed system? So what we would want to say is that we need to go back to the drawing table. The government needs to rethink the whole process. This process is it's actually very funny and dumbfounding that in January this year, during the Universal Periodic Review, the government accepted two recommendations. One, to assent to the 1954 Convention on the Status of Statelessness, and secondly, to also ratify the 1961 Convention on Reduction of Statelessness. You have accepted these recommendations at the Human Rights Council, but you come back and you're telling us that you still do not want to recognize people who qualify according to the Constitution and according to the Immigration and Citizenship Act, people who qualified to be Kenyans, and you do not want to give them the documents for them to live in a life of dignity, for them to live as real human beings.
Now, the arguments you raise, but the government would also argue it's come this far. The millions of people who've already been registered, you know, given Huduma numbers and more to come. The ID has been the basis by which we operate as citizens in this country. This will be a hard one to get the government to change its mind or do something differently.
What we are saying is that the fact that we have a lesser number of people who do not have IDs in Kenya does not justify that their rights should be violated. Every human right is important, even if it's for a single citizen. A single citizen should not be disenfranchised because the majority are having their way. The minority should also have their say. What we are saying here is that a human right is a human right. It doesn't mean if it's for one person. It doesn't mean if it's for a small population. And the reason why we have protections, the reason why we have Article 56 in the Constitution of Kenya is because of the realization that there are communities, there are groups in this country that might end up being voiceless. And for them to be voiceless, we must have special measures that are going to ensure that their rights are not being violated. So it's not about the majority, it's about respecting the rights of every human being. And that is why we have the Universal Declaration of Human Rights. That is why Kenya is a member of the International Community of Human Rights System. So we must be able to say that every human right is important here. And we cannot subject any individual to the human treatment just because 30 million Kenyans have ID cards.
So in a sense, you're saying this is discrimination against these minorities. Why do you think, in your view, the government will be reluctant to give these people citizenship?
Okay, I do not want to really speculate on the reasons because we don't know the policy discussions internally within the government. It would be misleading for me to kind of speculate or assume the reasons why this is happening. What we know is that the government has dragged its foot. We've gone with the Nubian High Commission, we've gone to the African Commission on Peoples and Human Rights, where we presented a case against the government. And the African Commission on Peoples and Human Rights found the government in violation of these rights and ordered the government to rectify that situation. I mean, that is a ruling that is on the table. We went to the African Expert Committee on Children Welfare of the African Commission. They came to the same conclusion. We've had a court case on Huduma Number that gave certain orders, and one of the orders was the government must put a framework that will ensure that every person, every community is not excluded in being identified as a Kenyan if that was the claim. The government is disregarding that court order. So we do not know what the motivation by the government for the government doing this. What we are concerned is that we want the recognition, we want the protection of the rights of everyone, including these communities that are facing a lot of challenges. The motivation of the government is known to it. They've not told us the reasons why they do not want to actually obey the court orders. And we've had a government in this last few years which has, shown a lot of tendency to disregard court orders and only implement court orders that they think are, are in line with what they want. I mean, that is not a democracy. We are a democracy, and if we are a democracy, then we are operating in a system of, three arms of government working independent of each other. And so that means that the executive is required by law to respect the orders that are coming from the judiciary. Okay. Otherwise, we become a jungle state.
So, okay, now, so you say that these processes that the government is currently following are flawed. What would you propose? What would you want them? What kind of process would you want them to adopt?
What I was saying is that one, if you want to progress, let's start with the court order. That you want to progress with the Huduma Number rollout, then respect the court order and put in place a framework. And putting in place a framework would mean that you would implement the legal provisions, the Article 27 of the Constitution. You will implement the provisions of the Citizenship and Immigration Act that properly provides for the fact that all people who have a claim to Kenyan citizenship must be provided with that citizenship. And after providing them with that citizenship, you can then move on and roll out the process. That is one aspect. Or if they do not want to do that, then they should simply, roll out the Huduma Number process without come up with a new framework completely, without using the current ID system as the basis for providing the Huduma Number unique numbers and Huduma Number cards. Those are the two options on the table. Okay. That you either implement fully the court orders, international treaties that relate to statelessness in Kenya, and then we move to the next level where we know that nobody will be left behind. Nobody will be discriminated against. Nobody's rights are going to be violated. And when you're talking about, probably we don't have the disaggregated data in terms of the exact numbers, but an estimation of 10 million Kenyans is huge. Out of 47 million Kenyans, we're talking of about 30% of this population. That is not a small number.
Okay. Mr. Nyingori, thank you. We're going to take a short break now and come back, resume this conversation on Your World. Thank you.
Malkia siku njema na tunukiwa offers kila siku.
Piga star 444 hasi utunukiwe kileto double.
Maji mdosi wangu ametupa simu yangu ndani ya maji.
Mdosi wako kwa sawa?
Venye Nkirosha ameniambia ajui na akimpigia simu ashiki. Hi! Guy, what the?
For the women who deserve more, Moped is now in Kenya and more than 40 countries with its nylon-free surface. New Moped has unique softness and up to 100% protection. Your skin will love it.
Rock Industries Limited wanakuletea bidhaa za plastiki zinazotumika kila siku maishani, kuanzia matumizi ya jikoni, usafi na shuleni, miongoni mwa matumizi mengine. Chakula kitamu sio upishi tu, kikiwa kitamu kisha kipakuliwe katika vyombo maridadi kinakuwa kitamu zaidi. Ndio maana Rock Industries Limited wanahakikisha mezani na jikoni kunapendeza kwa kukuletea vyombo maridadi vya plastiki. Vyombo hivi ni vya viwango vya juu, vyenye rangi nzuri ya kupendeza, umbo wa kuvutia na dumu. Baadhi ya bidhaa za plastiki kutoka Rock Industries Limited ni vikombe, glasi, sahani, jagi, begi, bakuli, vijiko, vichana na kadhalika. Na bidhaa hizi muhimu zinapatikana katika duka lililo karibu nawe pamoja na maduka ya jumla kwa bei nafuu. Kwa maelezo zaidi, wasiliana na Rock Industries Limited kupitia nambari 0722575619 au 0736028181.
Nashtakiwa na kitu hata hiyo public news and mimi najua hiyo ni nini. Then the next nikaambiwa mada ya msaidizi kwa rastamende. Hiyo crime mimi nisome yangu nikakubali.
Niliingia nikiwa mchanga sana kamiti.
And when the gates open, you're so excited to start life again.
I don't have the identity card. I'm like a luggage to my mom.
Kutoka nikapata mtoto wangu mmoja ameteseka. Find such an unforgiving society that brands you an ex-con.
I've had many opportunities to get better jobs. Then that's when I went to the DCI. Then wakaniambia they can nisaidia.
Can something be done? Because actually it really denies many inmates an opportunity to progress.
It's one platform where everybody has a voice.
If we don't have jobs, if we don't have money, if our business...
Hosted by the King of Wit.
Do you know the Bible to that much detail? Ama hizi ni zile tu zinaendanishana na dhambi zenye unajua.
It's basically everybody's show.
Vitamin C ni cassava, shauri ya nguvu. Vitamin D ni dania.
Ana chakula, anaimba. I have decided.
The Wicked Edition with Dr. Kingori and the Guesswork CEO, Kenya Judy.
The Kisumu County Assembly specializes in stimulants to the specific concentrated coffee,
where humor meets sense.
Moses Kuri amenitwanga hapa sasa.
Soldiers wanakuanga wameka polisi kids. Mbona nyinyi mkimbiangi mkituona?
The Wicked Edition. Every Friday at 7:30 p.m. only on NTV.
Wewe lori imekata break. Bra, when you gotta go with Neptune.
Welcome back to Your World, and this morning on this Human Rights Day, we are looking at various aspects of that issue, including Huduma Number and the question of citizenship. But just before we get back into our discussion, a few of the stories that we have for you this morning. In the cellars of the renowned Krikovo winery in Moldova, just a handful of visitors inspect the wine bottles and take selfies. This legendary winery used to welcome 100,000 visitors each year, but now wine tourism, the landmark of this former Soviet republic, has been hit hard by the restrictions imposed due to the coronavirus pandemic. The elegant Castle Mimi Wine Resort, founded in the 19th century, has lost 70% of its tourist flow and is trying to find creative ways to stay afloat. Now visitors can participate in designing labels, attend wine blending workshops, or even try wine spa treatments. The company also relaunched production of spirits to meet a growing demand for alcohol disinfectants, employing waiters after its restaurant was closed for 4 months of lockdown. One of the founders of the long COVID SOS support group says that progress in the UK has definitely been made when it comes to recognition of the condition, with the National Health Service announcing in October that sufferers will be offered specialized help at clinics across England, but she says more needs to be done.
We're all members of a club no one wanted to join. Different backgrounds, ages, experiences. Thousands and thousands of us have been struggling for weeks and months with ongoing symptoms of COVID-19. These are some common symptoms, but there are many more. Some of us have been ill throughout, with others having relapses. We're still very ill. We're feeling pressure to return to work, to care for families, and get back to normal, when we still feel anything but. No one seems to be able to answer our questions or give reassurance.
We're still campaigning for more people to understand the problems of people who are suffering from long COVID, be that health professionals, employers, and their family and friends, because unfortunately many sufferers still come up against disbelief, even from their close family members. In England, we have these clinics in the pipeline, and the NHS are working on this. The devolved authorities were not so sure. People in Wales, Scotland, Northern Ireland are still saying they can't get referred to specialist clinics. Nobody knows whether there will be any specialist clinic. I think it's mixed. Some people report that their employers are sympathetic and allow them time off. Some people have lost their jobs. Of course, it's not only employers. People on zero-hour contract or who are self-employed are really in a difficult situation, because they will try to work when they shouldn't, because working is liable to cause relapses.
The mother of a 9-year-old girl who died from acute respiratory failure in London after repeated asthma attacks says that without air pollution, her daughter would still be here, and that she hopes the coroner's inquest will conclude that it played a role in her death.
My daughter became ill exactly 10 years ago now, and she had what is a normal cold. That's how it first started to show, and then she developed a cough, which sounds a bit like a smoker's, like a smoker's cough. So they didn't even know it was asthma to start off with, because it was very unusual. We have in our local authority like a review, so they actually look at the reasons and things like that, and it came out as from the review that her triggers were something in the air. But the more we looked into it, we found out on the 14th, Valentine's Day, it was one of the biggest spikes in air pollution near where I actually live. But what needs to happen is governments need to do things to actually clean the air up. So if you think about 90% of the UK at some point has air pollution. And there are lots of people who live near busy roads. So unfortunately, you live where you live. Not everyone can live or afford to live in the countryside. Well, Stephen Holgate said without the illegal levels of air pollution, he believes that my daughter would still be alive now. And that's quite a hard thing to take. So without that, she would still be here. And she would have been 17 in January. So that's my journey and that's my story. So this was in our local church. Yeah, so, and this is a picture that I think a few people have seen quite a bit.
Faced with a dysfunctional health system and the resignations of 3 local leaders in quick succession, Italy has turned to a charity more accustomed to war zones to help tackle coronavirus in its poorest region. International NGO Emergency, which specializes in providing healthcare to victims of war, poverty and landmines, has agreed to help out in Calabria and also providing field hospitals. But its surgeon founder, Gino Strada, a veteran of health crises in Sudan and Rwanda, denied he was being lined up as health commissioner for the southern region after a series of chaotic postings. Calabria, the toe of Italy's boot, was spared the worst when the country became the first in Europe to be hit by coronavirus earlier this year. A melancholy guitar melody intertwines with an ethereal beat as wild-haired singer Luyan intones his hometown's feelings into a microphone. Virus in Wuhan, we all survived. In music, graffiti, even comics, Wuhan artists are beginning to pay homage to their city with works referencing its coronavirus suffering, punishing 76-day lockdown and subsequent rebirth. Wuhan's people made a great sacrifice for the whole nation and the world, Lu said, of the song's intended message. The song, Wuhan 2020, is the title track of the pandemic-themed debut album by Wuhan synth rock trio Hardcore Raver in Tears, conceived and written remotely while the bandmates were separated during the lockdown. So welcome back to our conversation, and with me via Zoom is Mr. Nyangori Ohenjo, who is the CEO Center for Minority Rights Development. Now, Bwana Nyangori, one of the biggest concerns Kenyans have had regarding Huduma Number is the amount of data that is in the hands and will continue to be in the hands of government, and to what use it's going to be put to. Do you also have concerns in that area?
Of course there are concerns. Basically because as minorities, indigenous peoples, we are very scared with the kind of data mining that is going on. We are not really sure why this data is being required, and why even in the data that is required in its own sense, we are leaving out certain aspects of data. Now, on the one hand, you have a situation whereby we've not had very proper data protection systems in the country until just the other day when the government rushed through a process. And I say rushed through because to me, a process that is rushed through to just fill in a legal gap because people went to court and made a valid claim that this country does not have data protection laws, this data does not have data protection institutions. Then you decide to come up with funny amendments. You go to Parliament, rush them through, and then you appoint a person to be the data protector. That does not ensure data protection in the first instance. You're just putting in place a framework, but we are not assured that this framework is going to work. So the issue here is that we are trying to be cosmetic in this particular case to just meet an end, you know, in the question of data protection. And beyond that, there's an amount of data that is being mined that we're not sure why it's being mined or why other type of data is not being mined. When you go to the Huduma number form, for instance, at the area of livelihoods, there is a specification of only 3 types of livelihoods. It's either service, and if it's service, we assume it's not clear. That form is not clear what service really means. We assume that it's employment. It's not clear whether it is self-employment. There is the industry, and then there is agriculture. We are not, these terminologies are not defined. Now, we are in a society where we look at our livelihoods in different perspectives. Somebody sat in an office somewhere, and because that is the concept that this person has interacted with in life, then he thinks everybody responds to this. I think it is important, or it was important, that people sit down as stakeholders in this country, as people who, you know, who involve themselves in different aspects of development, to agree on some of these terminologies so that everybody is on the same page. You know, so when I go to that form, I do not know whether, you know, my work is industry or whether my work is service. It's not defined. Now, when you go to it,
but Mr. Nyangori, when for a government that has agriculture as one of its key pillars, don't you think it's useful in terms of their planning for them to get a sense of how much of their population is engaged in one or other form of agriculture, for example?
What does agriculture entail? That would be the question. We've had policies in this country that define agriculture. Okay, by definition, agriculture is supposed to include fishing, agriculture is supposed to include livestock production, agriculture is supposed to include cash crop, whatever systems. But by practice, we've had policies in this country in practice that define agriculture as crop production, that define agriculture as commercial livestock production. So you're leaving out pastoralism, and this is what we've encountered since 1963. Pastoralism has never been part of the conversation until after the constitution was passed, when pastoralism was recognized effectively. And even when you look at the BBI conversation, for instance, let's come very near, when we had pastoralist politicians actually forcing the government to, or forcing the protagonists of BBI, let me use that, to include, you know, livelihoods like pastoralism in the final BBI conversation. So by theory, agriculture involves so many, you know, aspects of production systems. But in practice in this country, agriculture has meant crop, and it has actually meant cash crop production, not subsistence. So we have a situation where we need to define what these concepts mean in very simple terms so that everybody is on one page.
And just
I can sit here and
Mr. Yeah. Sorry, let me take you back a little bit, because all this falls under the under this whole data discussion. The fact that we have this new data commissioner in place, that does not give you confidence that in terms of the integrity of the process and its intent?
It doesn't exude confidence because of the process. You know, the process is as important as the product, the end product. What was the process? If we wanted a process that we can, you know, we can own, then we need to go back to the provision of public participation. This is a very critical conversation that I think Kenyans should have been brought on board. Kenyans should not have been whipped. Actually, what happened is that Kenyans were whipped. Kenyans were threatened to register for Huduma Number. Kenyans were told, if you do not do this, you not get this. Now, that is not a process where people understand what is going on. People went registering for Huduma Number out of fear, not out of understanding of what really this whole thing is going to mean to them. But people did not.
But do you think there's any value to the Huduma Number at all?
Now, to me, when I look at everything, and you know, the zero-sum game comes back to identity. And if it's a question of identity, we've tried with a number of digital platforms. When it comes to the issue of identity and citizenship, my thinking is that as structured, as designed, the current architecture, I do not think it adds value to Kenyans' lives. I do not think it makes a difference so much, because we have processes that are going on in this country that are able to resolve so many of those issues that, you know, the government claims that they want to resolve with the Huduma number.
So in that case, in that case, what do you foresee as the challenges if government still presses ahead with, you know, issuance of Huduma number?
I think the biggest challenge will be that by the end of the day, you will have a lot of resistance, because many people will end up, suffering exclusion, and that will create a lot of disaffection with government, and that will create a lot of conflicts. Let me give, for example, you are saying that a child should be given Huduma number almost immediately after that child is born. We have communities in this country where children are not born in a facility because facilities are very far. We have situations where many women, you know, give birth in their homes, and it takes them ages, it takes them months for them to access a formal facility. We do not have registration centers in far-fetched places in Isiolo, in Marsabit, in Turkana, in Tana River. How do we want to bring these children into the system when there are no registration places in the first place, when there is no infrastructure in first place? We are saying that this was an idea that was developed in a four-walled office without due consideration of the challenges out there, and they're going to arise conflicts, you know, when the implementation starts. So we need to be sober, we need to sit down, and we need to bring everybody on board. Let's leave nobody behind.
So, Mr. Nyang'aure, what would be your recommendations to government in terms of the way ahead or the way forward for the Huduma number? The main recommendation that we have is let us halt the process. Let us bring everybody on board. You know, if we must go the Huduma number way, if we must go the digital way in terms of citizenship, identity, and things like that, let everybody be on board. Let us not implement this as, you know, through fiat, through orders, through, threats that if you don't do this, we shall not give you these kinds of services. This is an important process that we need every Kenya to own it. We need every Kenya to be part of its implementation. And the only way to do that, and the Constitution actually identifies the principle of public participation. The only way to do that is to ensure that the masses in this country properly understand everything around Huduma number. So let us go back to the drawing board. Let us continue using the current ID system until we've resolved the citizenship issues of the more than 10 million people that, you know, very likely do not fall into this group of being citizens of Kenya by having the documents. They are citizens of Kenya, but they do not have identification documents. We must resolve that. And if we have acceded to the UPR recommendation that we must address statelessness, then let's ensure that every Kenyan is a citizen first by fact of having the rightful documents, and then we shift to the next architecture of Huduma number. What we want is a process that is implemented with the goodwill of Kenyans, with the good of Kenyans at heart. We do not want a process that appears to be meeting certain whimsical, whatever objectives of a particular group in the executive, because that is what it appears currently. Okay. Because it appears that somebody is just trying to push through this process for particular benefits. The way it is structured, the way it is designed. So let Kenyans be part of the process. Let us address the challenges that certain communities are facing in accessing identity documents
and be able to resolve those issues. So that when we roll out, nobody is disenfranchised.
Okay, but now, Mr. Nyangori, but given where we are at the moment, which is millions of people have already been registered, do you think there is any way of going back?
I think, there's no reason why a process should not be stopped if violations of human rights have been identified. Even if it's at the tail end, even if we had spent hundreds of billions or trillions of money, when human rights become the center of any particular process, then money cannot equate human rights. We have to stop the process. It does not matter about, it's not about how many Kenyans have already registered in the system. It's about, are we having a process that is going to violate human rights? And if we're having a process that is going to violate human rights, it doesn't matter how much we've invested in that process. That process should be stopped. And that is the international principle, that it's not about money, it's not about numbers, it's about human rights. It's about the protection of the rights of every Kenyan, protection of the rights of every child in this country, protection of the rights of every community. So it's not about the numbers, it's not about money, it's about human rights. So as long as human rights of a particular people are being violated, that process, that process actually is unconstitutional, and that process should stop. So even if almost 90% Kenyans had enrolled, and the process is discovered to be violating the rights of the people, it does not matter, the process should stop.
So even when in a situation where a lot of people would quite happily move away from having so many government documents, and they're all merged into this single ID document, and and also that gives you access to services, some might say that there is still a lot of value in Huduma Number.
The reason why we have protections specifically for minorities is to guard against the majoritarian or dominance of the other voices. The majority might think that, yeah, we are good with this. But as long as you have minority rights being violated, those protections are enshrined in the Constitution and must be protected. That is the essence of protecting minority rights. It's to guard against majoritarian tendencies, so that you have a way of ensuring that these voices that might not have the power, might not have the ability to change systems, are protected and are listened to. So it's not a question of the majority here, it's a question of human rights. It's a question of there are people here whose rights might be violated. So it's not about the majority feeling, it's about the human rights. That is the foundation of human dignity. So even if it was 1 million Kenyans, then we must take due consideration of that 1 million Kenyans in this particular case when it comes to human rights, in disregard of the majority.
Okay, and now in our last couple of minutes, Mr. Nyangori, now if you were to address the president, mind you, he himself has got a Huduma Number, what would you say to him? He does watch this program, we believe, sometimes.
This is what I would say to His Excellency the President. That let us stop, Mr. President, let us stop this process until we bring everybody on board, until we ensure that the minorities, and he's been at the forefront actually of the campaign to recognize stateless Kenyan citizens. He's, of course, recognized quite a number of communities. Let us stop this process until we are sure that every community that is agitating for citizenship, every community, every member of the community that is stateless has acquired the Kenyan citizenship, and then we move forward. Okay. That is what I would say. That we do not want a process that is going to leave any Kenyan behind.
Thank you. Thank you so much, Mr. Nyangori Ohenjo, who is the CEO of the Center for Minority Rights Development, for sharing those thoughts, very strong arguments there regarding the Huduma Number and its knock-on effect on citizenship, etc. So we thank you for your time. Wish you a good day. Thank you for joining us. We'll take a short break. We'll be back with Your World Extra. Find out what we have in store for you.
We are Nation, Africa's independent media brand. We are committed to empowering all Africans, from the young to the old, from the curious to the educated, and from the heart of the cities to the rural areas. We are Nation. Join us, because if you want to get far, you do it together. Nation. Empower Africa.
Nashtakiwa na kitu hata hiyo public news and mimi siko najua hiyo ni nini. Then the next nikaambiwa mada ya msaidizi wangu Rastamende. Hiyo crime mimi nisome yangu nikakubali.
Niliingia nikiwa mchanga sana committee.
And when the gates open, you're so excited to start life again.
I don't have the identity card. I'm like a luggage to my mom.
Kutoka nikapata mtoto wangu mmoja ameteseka. Find such an unforgiving society that brands you an ex-con.
I've had many opportunities to get better jobs. Then that's when I went to the DCI. Then wakaniambia I wasn't saying.
Can something be done? Because actually it really denies many inmates an opportunity to progress.
Investing back home never easy, but those in the diaspora are getting smarter.
Engage the right partners.
The secret behind this multi-million shilling project in Kitisuru by over 300 Kenyans living in the US. On Kenya to the World, KQ's cargo business on the New York route amid COVID-19.
KQ Cargo did not stop operating.
And on My Magical Kenya, the changing face of Dunga Beach in Kisumu.
To relief, thank you Gold Crown. If regular milk makes you feel uncomfortable, try Gold Crown lactose-free milk. Milk that loves you.
I'm waking you up to the hottest morning show.
Tina Kagia, The Morning Fix, Nation FM.
Hey, how are you doing? I am Tina Kagia, aka The Voice. Every single morning, starting from 6 up until 10, catch me on The Morning Fix on 96.3 Nation FM, where good music is. Let's have awesome conversations. Talk about life, love, money, politics, school, education. No topic is out of bounds.
Mornings with Tina Kagia, 96.3.
Nothing but the best of conversations. Talk about your stories, because honestly, it's important to unwind. See you every day.
All the hits with Tina Kagia.
They're my morning show.
The Morning Fix on Nation FM.
Nation FM,
where good music lives.
They recognize that there is no wall that you can build that can keep the enemy away from you if God doesn't keep you safe. And that's a big lesson for us.
It's one platform where everybody has a voice.
If we don't have jobs, if we don't have money, if our business...
Hosted by the King of Wit.
Do you know the Bible to that much detail? Ama hizi ni zile tu zinaendanishana na dhambi zenye unajua.
It's basically everybody's show.
Vitamin C ni cassava, shauri ya nguvu. Vitamin D ni dania. Ana chakula, anaimba. I have decided.
The Wicked Edition with Dr. Kingori and the Guesswork CEO, Kenya, Judy.
The Kisumu County Assembly specializes in stimulants, to be specific, concentrated coffee,
where humor meets sense.
Moses Kure amenitwanga hapa
soldiers wanakuanga wameka polisi kids. Mbona nyinyi mkimbiangi mkituona?
The Wicked Edition Every Friday at 7:30 p.m. only on NTV. This week on The Trend.
We are the Galem Sugar. Same time on the Galem Banana. We are the Galem Sugar. Same time on the Galem Banana.
Abs.
Only on The Trend.
What a relief! Thank you, Gold Crown. If regular milk makes you feel uncomfortable, try Gold Crown lactose-free milk. Milk that loves you. Nawa mikono sasa. Nawa mikono sasa. Nawa mikono sasa. Nawa mikono sasa. Unawajua mikono ni mojawapo ya njia bora zaidi ya kukukinga dhidi ya magonjwa na ya kukufanya uwe na afya kwa mwaka mzima.
Everybody!
We are Nation, Africa's independent media brand. We are committed to empowering all Africans, from the young to the old, from the curious to the educated, and from the heart of the cities to the rural areas. We are Nation. Join us, because if you want to get far, you do it together. Nation. Empower Africa.
Welcome back to this extra session of Your World this Thursday morning. Now, every year, pounding rains wash away mountains of plastic waste from the streets of Jakarta, with some of it ending up as far away as Bali's beaches. So scientists are turning to satellites to trace the rubbish and figure out how to tackle the problem. They hope following the waste movement will help them understand the full extent of the problem and decide how best to collect it based on seasonal, wind and water current patterns.
Better understanding where those plastic are beaching or going, it's going to help them a lot on prioritizing their action. For instance, if they have to purchase a dam at the river, they will know which river is a very high priority in terms of environmental impact, in terms of biodiversity impact, and where to put the money first, I would like to say. Okay. Of the one that we have released 6 months ago are still drifting. Unfortunately, I would like to say, because it means that they are still at the ocean, and most probably it means that most of those marine debris will reach all the big accumulation of plastic that we are all aware of, either at the Indian or Pacific Ocean. Most of them, 90% of them, are actually beach on the Javanese coast here, okay, and only that one actually went to that direction. So it seems to say that only 10% of the marine debris from that river are going to the Indian Ocean, okay, at that time of the season.
Now, Bangkok has been gripped by a rubber duck frenzy since pro-democracy protesters used giant inflatables to shield themselves from water cannon spray last month, when police mounted a crackdown on a November rally deploying tear gas and water cannon outside Parliament. Footage of demonstrators hiding behind giant ducks went viral within days. Duck-themed paraphernalia became a staple among street vendors at protests, and the birds featuring on everything from hats to hair clips. Protesters are calling for the Prime Minister to resign, a rewrite of the army-drafted constitution, and for reforms to the monarchy. A taboo-smashing demand in a country where the ultra-wealthy royal family has long been untouchable. A Christmas tree is lit on an empty Trafalgar Square in London during a sparsely attended annual lighting ceremony. The Lord Mayor of Westminster says it's important to maintain the tradition even though people can't actually be here in person.
It's really important that we maintain the tradition because there's a unique friendship between the UK and Norway, symbolised by this tree that they send over each year from Oslo. Normally I would have gone to Oslo to chop down the tree, or participate in chopping down the tree, and the Mayor of Oslo would have been here to participate in this ceremony, but that's not been possible because of travel restrictions and quarantine concerns. So, and normally we'd have lots of people here, thousands of people, but this year it's not been possible to do that. So we've effectively tried to do as much as we possibly can virtually and digitally to allow people to participate, even though they can't actually be here in person. We're delighted that the shops are open, that people are back on the streets and you know, safely going about their business. Everyone knows that it's not normal times, but we're getting closer to normal times and people are acting responsibly, taking necessary precautions, but nevertheless doing their shopping and having fun.
Visitors return to London's British Museum, which reopens after a month's closure, and as the museum prepares to celebrate the 20th anniversary of its famous Great Court, the largest covered public square in Europe.
I was surprised how excited I was to just leave the house today, to be honest. You know, I've been indoors, I work from home, I'm a musician, so it's just really nice to get out of the house and, you know, be amongst people, albeit at distance, and do something interesting with the day.
The reason I wanted to come today is because I thought at this particular time that we're going through, it's going to be the most quietest time to come here, relax, and not be in front of loads and loads of people, and really get a chance to appreciate history.
Well, we've limited the number of people coming into the museum. So the limit now is 2,000 per day. At this time of the year, we would normally have 11,000 people coming to the museum. So it's very different. And the reason why we've gone for 2,000 people a day is to ensure the social distancing rules and to make sure our visitors feel safe. We learned so much when we reopened, and we operated a system of test and learn. So every day the team would talk about how the day had gone. So we would look at things that worked really well and things that hadn't maybe worked quite so well. How could we make it easier for the visitor? So that's what we did every day, and that's why it makes opening this time.
The Canadian Kennel Club and annual shelters are reporting record levels of pet adoption applications this year. After being on a waiting list for a service animal for more than 4 years, one family decided to try to find a dog that they could train themselves during a COVID-19 lockdown, but ended up being conned.
she's 5 months?
Yeah. We decided to do a transfer to reserve the puppy for $300. And as soon as we did the transfer, they said that they didn't have it and to send another one. And then I knew that it was not real. We were kind of shocked that someone would do this. And we had told this person who the dog was for. We had told them that it was for our daughter who had cerebral palsy and she was really looking for a puppy and a dog to grow up with her. So this person knew exactly who they were dealing with, and they still went forward with scamming. Ocean cried a lot, and we were trying to make it seem like it was less of a issue, play it down a bit, but she knew. She thought that the next day her puppy was coming, and we had to tell her that it wasn't, but that we were going to keep looking and we would eventually find one. So that was a really hard day for her. Take your time. It's easy to fall in love with a picture of a dog and the comments that the owners have made, but take a time, step back, because you may find some information that when you take that time, you realize that maybe you need to look a little deeper into it.
Nowadays, people are going to create some fake websites, ads, even ads on Facebook, on Instagram. They're going to use some legitimate breeder's name or something, a name that's really similar, so people feel comfortable and more people fall into that scam. So with the COVID, with the pandemic, it just gave the fraudsters an extra excuse, asking people for upfront money without actually seeing the animal in person. So that's one thing to really be careful about. If you can't see the animal in person, we don't suggest buying. It's definitely a widespread issue. If you shop online for a dog, there's a big chance that you're going to fall on some fraudulent advertisement. As much as 80% of ads that are online are fraudulent. So that's why if you plan on shopping for an animal online, you really need to be aware of the red flags so you don't fall victim to this scam and lose up to thousands of dollars.
In the drought-ravaged south of Madagascar, people are filling their bellies with white clay mixed with tamarind to cope with famine. We call it survival soil because it allows the acidic taste of tamarind to seep into our mouths, which staves off hunger, said Dode Fandilava, a 35-year-old farmer in the village of Fenaivo. These days, we no longer look for food to live on, but for ways to fill the empty stomachs, said the father of 6. The staple food in the arid region is usually cactus fruit, but after more than a year without rain, even the cacti have stopped producing fruit. In Fenaivo, villagers dread a repeat of a terrible drought that killed hundreds in the 1990s. Okay, now, 'Tis the Season is a wonderful Kenyan Christmas experience that has run in Nairobi for the last 7 years. The 8th edition of this beloved event comes with all sorts of new and exciting angles, all made possible by the 'Tis the Season crew in conjunction with the Nation Media Group. 2020 comes with a brand new 'Tis the Season 11-track album featuring all your favorite carols with an authentic Kenyan twist, with the first wonderful Sing Yesu Amezaliwa featuring BNM, Baraza of Sauti Sol, Waire, Wambura, Mitaru, Eric Wainaina, and Atemi Oyungu. Incidentally, Eric and Atemi are the artistic and music directors of this wonderful album that is available now on mdundo.com. Our main event is our special TV and online teaser season Christmas special, scheduled to premiere at 10 p.m. on Sunday, the 20th of December, exclusively on NTV and NTV YouTube channel. Gather your whole family and squad together as we get a dose of Kenyan Christmas magic together. Some really good fun there. Christmas with that difference. Yeah, fantastic stuff. And I can now link up with Safan Njora, who is an actor, MC, and our musician. Amani
Yeah.
Good morning.
Good morning. Good morning.
Sasa, we just previewed that really beautiful rendition of Yesu Amezaliwa. What more to expect from teaser season, 8th edition?
Oh man, the music, the arrangement, the look, the feel. There's just so much that we can. I can't even put it in words. You just have to be there to experience or to watch it live or to watch it, so that you know what it is. Yeah.
And for those who may be not very familiar with this, why a departure from the usual White Christmas songs and stuff?
Okay, so first of all, it's even the term White Christmas is not very accurate, yeah, because it doesn't snow everywhere. But then our music and our flavor and our culture is so rich, so why not take the music that we have enjoyed growing up and give it our own twist or give it our own flavor. So I wouldn't say it's a departure. I think it's even going deeper into who we are. Yeah. Okay. Now, I recognize some faces. Tell me about some of the people who are involved. Ah, man, there's Mayon there. There's Karemi. There's Kendi Nkonge, Wambura. There's Manasseh. There's Totsville, Kimeto. There's Lisa. There's Charity. There are so many people over here. And there's Mavo. There are so many people. Benjamin, Asaf Zele. Man, nitaishiwa na mate.
Sasa, kwenye video it look like a
Waire, Eric Wainaina, Atemi. What more do you want?
What else? Sasa, kwenye video it looked like a lot of fun. Inakuwaga fun even in real life huko?
Kabisa. Of course, it's serious work. And people are focused in everything, but it is beautiful and it's enjoyable to be around this kind of music and to be part of it. So yes, it's true. There's nothing fake over there.
What's your own involvement? Wewe kama wewe?
So I am going to be hosting, and I also do I'm doing spoken word. So I've been doing spoken word for all the editions apart from one. And this year, with the way 2020 has been, you can imagine what the music and the spoken word will be. So, yeah.
Oh, okay. And for people who want to catch this, just remind us where?
You can catch this. So, wait a minute. Where can they catch it?
Apart from NTV, obviously. Which
So, on the 18th, on the 18th and the 20th. On the 20th on NTV and on the 18th at the Hub. Yeah.
Oh, okay. Sasa ungetuachia Mr. Michache of your spoken word.
Pana.
Utano tutaribu?
Pana. Secret, iko kwa vault. Hiyo iko kwa vault. Siwezi isema saizi. Hiyo iko kwa vault.
Hawezi kutuibia siri?
Yeah. As you can see, I'm not even aware of the dates because of how zoned in I am on the spoken word. It is that heavy. Yeah.
Oh, okay. So tell me about your experience, when getting involved in this.
Okay, first of all, let me just say, anytime there's been a teaser season, it has coincided with me wanting to have some sort of healing, and I've gotten it. Yeah. Atemi called me up, and we had a meeting. I remember back in the day, we had a meeting. Patricia Kioro was involved as well. And we crafted a story around the music and also spoken word. And ever since then, it has been one of those things that I look forward to. Actually, I wasn't a big fan of Christmas, but teaser season over the years has made me a believer Yeah.
Okay. And finally,
yeah.
Nini Muyongeza additional this time round. This is the 8th edition.
Yeah. Just a minute. Ebu kuna interview, nyamaza. So, what has changed? Okay, what has been added? Yeah.
Yeah.
We have new artists. They're not new, but they have joined the Tis the Season. They're obviously established. Arrangements. The arrangements are different, and you know the way 2020 is. Everything is new.
It's a new normal.
There's no normal. It's just new. You can't say it's a new normal. It's just new.
Okay.
Everything is just new. Yeah. And we are grateful that we have gotten to the end of this year, that we are still here, and
Indeed.
we also want to honor everyone and everyone going through the processes, the way the country has been, the way the world has been. It's just going to be a wonderful way to, just say, thank God you're still here.
Fantastic. Asante sana. So, Esafan Nenjora, thank you so much for joining us this morning. And to our viewers back home, don't miss this here on NTV.
Please.
It is the season. That's it we have time for on your world today, which was a mix of Human Rights Day, a bit of music, a bit of drama and all that. But yeah, it's a Christmas season is here. So thank you so much for joining us. We'll be back tomorrow at the usual time of 7 a.m. Obviously, always starting off with a workout session at 6:30 till 7. Join us if you can. Stay safe and barikiwa.